You're with us here on a fresh new edition of Mid-Cap Radar. The market's down almost at the day's low, 78 lower on the Nifty, 251 lower on the Sensex. And not very much has changed in terms of the mood, momentum or the sentiment out there. As I've been saying earlier in the day as well, the signs were there yesterday with a very, very narrow up move. The Nifty closing up 40 points, but the overall market looking extremely weak. And it's showing up on the Nifty today as well. And the big reason for that is you don't have the help of a big one like a Reliance or some of the other IT stocks, etc., like what we had yesterday. So a bit of give back is what's going on. 10,882. Remember, US markets overnight were closed. We had, of course, European trading. And as we start Mid-Cap Radar, there will be the first European rates today, which will start to show through. With me, my colleague Samira. Hi, Samira.
Hi, Prashant. Good afternoon to you. So, yeah, all cues today will be coming in from Europe and over there as well. The concerns that will be dominating sentiment is that the IMF has cut the global growth outlook for FY20. So I expect the European markets to actually open a tad bit on the front foot, and also in the absence of any cues from the mother market, that is the US. Also, Theresa May has promised in Parliament to be more flexible as far as the Brexit plans are concerned. So that's another key monitorable in Europe. So about 0.5% lower there. First up, these are our top stories. Market is off the day's low, trades in line with Asian peers. Heavyweights, HDFC Twins, Infosys and ITC exert pressure. Kotak Mahindra Bank supports. The mid-cap index too is under pressure.
The Sun Pharma stock surges after the company takes remedial measures following reports of whistleblower complaints. CNBC TV 18 Newsbreak confirmed that Sun Pharma will transfer its domestic operations from Aditya Medisales currently to a wholly owned arm. The company also denies having given any loans or guarantees to the real estate company Suraksha Realty.
Central banks everywhere must be independent to ensure macroeconomic stability. That's the word coming in from IMF chief economist Geeta Gopinath. She adds that central bank reserves are fickle and must be managed carefully.
FY20 is likely to be a challenging year for IT services industry, with growth being flat or moderately lower. Offshore Insight says IT companies to be impacted by a drop in tech spending.
And CRISIL's downgrade of debentures of IL&FS SPV Jharkhand Roads to D. ICRA puts mutual funds which have exposure to IL&FS SPVs under rating watch, but experts say courts will decide in favour of the established norms of ring fencing and escrowing cash flows.
Okay, Ashwini Gujral is with us to talk us through what he's making of things. Ashwini, afternoon. Has anything changed at all, or we're set for the lower boundaries, maybe a breach of that, entering lower ranges?
See, in fact, we got very close, I think 10,870. But the good news here is that in spite of whatever news that is there, the market is not really collapsing with any kind of momentum. 100 points on Bank Nifty isn't really much. So that way, I think that by the end of the day, there could be some short covering. So this is a good time to get long on Nifty as well as Bank Nifty, because they spent the whole day coming off. So my sense is if you buy here, there's a good chance that Nifty closes back at 10,930, 950. We need to understand that this is a market where there is no follow through. So whichever way we go, beyond a point, neither selling nor buying kind of picks up. So that way, for the moment, Mahindra Lifespace is a buy with a stop of 410, target of 430. Indigo is a buy with a stop of 1070, target of 1120. And Axis Bank is a buy with a stop of 657, target of 680. And those one or two big winners that you need, they'll probably be in action fairly soon, because they will provide support and probably take the Nifty higher.
Okay, Ashwini, thanks very much for that. Appreciate you joining in on the top of 130 as always. And, we will pay attention to the flashes which are coming up at the bottom of the screen. My colleague Timsy is reporting, and this is sources telling her that the Ministry of Corporate Affairs is going to approach RBI seeking special dispensation for deferment of provisioning in some IL&FS companies. This is important information coming in. Government identifies few subsidiaries having ample funds in escrow accounts but unable to service debt. government to seek deferment of provisioning for these companies. Timsy is with us on the phone line. I'm being told, Timsy, what else are you picking up? And this is important.
Yes. Well, sources are indicating that after a detailed stock-taking meeting that MCA, Finmin officials and Uday Kotak-led panel along with bankers met today to assess the situation of the current IL&FS crisis, government has now decided to approach RBI seeking special dispensation when it comes to certain companies of IL&FS which it has identified as amber category of companies where there are enough funds available in the escrow account, but they are unable to service debt. And for those categories, government feels that they now need to talk to RBI to allow banks to have this deferment of provisioning so that these companies, these accounts don't get turned up as NPAs, which can give a relief to creditors as well as to the company to try and make an orderly resolution and then start making payments. Government feels that enough amount is available with these companies in the escrow account, but yes, given the current situation of crisis, government needs to assess and which will take time. Thus, this special dispensation needs to be given to banks as well as to companies to try and make payments with some more time relief coming in. So government under the current process has identified three categories. Amber category of companies where provisioning is required. Secondly, the red category of companies where government feels that there is not enough cash flow available and the companies would not be able to survive because they don't have operating funds as well. And in those cases, government is wanting to go in for outright sale of assets, whatever are there, so that the company can be turned, can go in for a complete resolution under the IBC process. And thirdly, the green category of companies where companies are healthy enough, they are already servicing debt, they have enough cash flows, so government would not like to touch them when it comes to asset sale. Rather, they would continue to monitor the progress of these green category companies, and they feel that these are healthy companies and they should continue under the current management, which is supervised by the government. So there is some sort of a relief that could come in for banks as well as for some companies of some subsidiary companies of IL&FS if RBI grants this provisioning. What we are understanding from sources that MCA will approach not just the bankers as well as RBI to seek this deferment of provisioning norms for these amber category of companies so that they can get some relief and start servicing debt as per the plan. And a complete solution to the entire IL&FS crisis is can be seen only in the next 3 to 4 months. After today's stock-taking meeting, government feels that Uday Kotak-led panel is confident that in next 4 to 5 months, a complete solution can be seen of this entire situation.
Okay, Timsy, got your point. So some relief for banks could be in the offing if RBI were to agree to a special dispensation. But Prashant, I would like to just point out over here that a lot of the mutual funds which also had exposure to these SPVs, they've already marked down their exposure. So NAVs have already come down. So for retail investors into these funds, that relief, so to say, would not be available.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, though, I think the impact for the banking system is, going to be way higher in any case. Mutual funds, absolutely. But I think the larger exposure is for banks. And Timsy, just to be clear, what you're saying is if a bank, a financial institution is lent to a SPV where the cash is coming in from the underlying project, but they're not being paid because the money can't be taken out of the escrow, those financial institutions, the MCA is saying RBI should allow them to actually defer provisioning, etc. Right? I think that's the news point out of this one at this point, right?
Yes. That's right.
Timsy, one more question. Is there any indication of how early MCA officials could meet the Reserve Bank?
Well, what we are understanding that the MCA secretary himself is likely to speak to RBI. He will not just speak to RBI, he will officially write to RBI. Secondly, he will also try and speak to bankers, especially SBI and other senior creditors, so that all are in the same chain, they are in the same loop, and government, knowing the government stand, RBI can consider this request, because now it will, because earlier when banks approached RBI turned down their request, and now banks today in the meeting did tell MCA that their request has been turned down from RBI. So now MCA in its own effort is now wanting to speak to RBI to try and give a government surety on this particular situation. And most likely when it is government talking to RBI, such requests are granted. However, we'll have to wait and watch for the current situation, because RBI will also need to assess how the NPA norms are going on for the banks and how healthy the particular bank and the company in question, the subsidiary in question, is before allowing this special dispensation.
Okay, Timsy, thank you very much for that. Sandeep Parekh is joining us right now of FinSec Law Advisors. By the way, why don't we put up these stocks? Let's start with IndusInd Bank. So let's look at the stock prices of lenders who've lent and have got large exposure to IL&FS. I mean, some of this exposure is to the holding company, but, some of this exposure is to SPVs as well. And we are talking about the SPV exposure. I mean, IndusInd, no noticeable sort of bump up on this. There is ICICI, there is Yes Bank, I think there is Axis Bank. I'm only talking about the large private banks who got exposure, which may be given some deferment as far as provisioning is concerned. And the big PSU banks were Bank of Baroda, Canara, and Indian Bank. SBI also got exposure.
I think Union Bank, BOI, all of
So those are the names which are coming through. Sandeep Parekh is with us of FinSec Law Advisors. Sandeep, thanks very much. So what Timsy is saying is that the Ministry of Corporate Affairs is going to ask the RBI, request the RBI to allow some deferment of provisioning in specific cases where, the money has gone to SPVs, which essentially is what we discussed earlier in the morning as well, where the money is there, cash flows are there, but they're not being paid out because the interpretation at this point apparently is that money cannot be touched. Your reaction, Sandeep?
Yeah, so I've, as I said in the morning, the concept of a juristic person means that the SPVs need to be treated separately as not some part of a generic group. So, whatever are the liabilities which are payable by the SPV need to be paid by them. So I don't think you can really legally connect the two, which is IL&FS and the SPVs. And I think that needs to be honored. And to the extent the court ruling goes contrary to that, I think somebody needs to kind of.
But I think but you can make the interpretation from what Timsy put out, the MCA. The government is also pretty clear that that's the way, that's the law of the land, right? That's what the law says, that these are ring-fence structures. So hence, if you've got exposure to it, you need not provide. I think if you were to interpret the government's thinking, it seems to be on those lines, as you pointed out, Sandeep.
Right. So again, this is relating to provisioning. But in reality, till the time the court clarifies this issue, different people provision it differently. So, ultimately this is MCA writing to RBI, so which means that RBI has to then in turn mandate the banks to do things in a particular way. That still is open the question for mutual funds and other stuff. And finally, as I said, the reality will only sink in after a couple of weeks. So once the court has said okay to what all of us are saying. But till we get that in black and white, I think it's create a bit of uncertainty.
So you expect lenders to await the RBI decision before they appeal to the courts? Or you think it might be just a matter of days now?
No, so this is, what MC is asking RBI is only deferment of provisioning. Yes. Provisioning doesn't create or, cede legal rights and liabilities. It's only in the books, internal books of accounts, how do you treat that?
So you think both the processes will continue simultaneously?
Correct. They have to, because this is only how you write it in your books. It has nothing to do with the actual payment of monies by these companies.
Okay, Sandeep, thanks very much. Thanks for coming back on. Appreciate your time here, as always, on CNBC TV 18. The market, just to go back to what's happening on the screen, we've, I think, picked up a little bit. The low of the day is 10,864 and we're at 10,900. So there is, a 35-point bounce which has come through on the Nifty. And let's see if it develops a little bit more. There you go, that spike there. Maybe the Bank Nifty we should put up as well and tell you if we're seeing something similar there. I think we are, a 0.25% lower on the Bank Nifty is what we've got. So there's a sharp spike up on the Nifty Bank as well. I don't know if this is lenders causing the spike. I did look at, specific charts of ICICI and the other lenders. They were all off the lows, but maybe collectively they are making that impact. Yeah, I think IndusInd, for example, is now back at almost the day's high. And a few of the others sort of exposed banks we put up earlier as well. But the Nifty as well and the Bank Nifty picking up a little bit from the lows. We take a very quick break here. There is a statement from Havells. Expect margin to improve in the fourth quarter owing to price increases. And I think some other forward-looking outlook statements after the results.
Presentation, and since then the stock has recovered because they say that margins will improve going forward owing to price increase and receding commodity costs. They also expect the durables business margins to improve as early as Q4, to sort of make up the yearly average. And so basically these are the two important forward-looking statements from Havells, which has now helped that stock move from the low point. A quick break. We'll be back with more in a bit.